We're living in very strange times. Okay, so we've somehow reached the point where the iPad is technically, on paper, more capable than the Mac. So we have an M4 iPad Pro and we have an M3 MacBook Pro, and well, let's not talk about the Mac Mini and the Mac Pro or the iMac. These are very, very strange times. However, before you take to the comments section and start calling me an idiot for the fact that these are completely different platforms, I know. The purpose of this video isn't to say that is better than that or vice versa. It's genuinely to help anyone who's trying to work out whether to buy an M4 iPad Pro or an M3 MacBook Pro. And I know there's lots of you out there. It's a really interesting choice, and there's a few things you need to bear in mind. While we're talking about the Mac, just a very quick word from today's sponsor, which is Trend Micro and their fantastic Cleaner One Pro. Basically, Cleaner One Pro makes it really easy to get rid of unnecessary files, so if you're anything like me, you do let things build up a little bit behind the scenes. The great thing is with Cleaner One Pro is that it sniffs them out and shows you exactly where they are. And then you can just do a quick clean to get rid of them, or use the System Optimizer to really find out what's going on your Mac. There's even a big files section, which is dedicated to those big files that are taking up space. But one of my favorite things about Cleaner One Pro is the duplicate photos feature, which is so handy when, if you're like me, you keep taking the same photo again and again and again, particularly when you're testing smartphones that don't have very quick shutter releases. The duplicate photos feature in Cleaner One Pro will help you get rid of those duplicates so quickly. But there's so much more built into Cleaner One Pro. There's a disk map that shows you exactly what's in certain folders. There's a startup manager, which is better than the startup manager that you get in Mac OS. There's a duplicate files feature, which does the same job as the duplicate photos feature I spoke about a moment ago. There's brilliant app management built into it, which means you can finally properly get rid of apps, which is pretty tricky on Mac OS. There's even a fantastic toolbar that sits at the top of the screen that monitors your CPU, your network usage, your memory usage, and gives you the option to do a quick scan for junk files. Cleaner One Pro is fantastic. It is the most obvious thing that I install first on any new Mac. To find out more, just click below. Let's start with the MacBook Pro, and if you've watched this channel for any amount of time, you'll know that I'm a big MacBook Pro fanboy. I spent £4,500 on this. Do I need this £4,500 version? No, but I've bought it because look at it. I've listed a few things here which I think speak very highly of the MacBook Pro, and my hope is that if you fall into the MacBook Pro buying category, if you're me basically, and you need one of these more than you need the M4 iPad Pro, you'll tick off at least 4 or 5 of these things and think, yeah, that's for me. First up, we have Mac OS, and no arguments unless you want to argue in the comments section, obviously. This is the best operating system ever. Windows isn't worth talking about. We've got to the point now where Apple is only kind of doing iterative updates to Mac OS. They're not doing these massive feature additions and huge leaps forward because they don't need to. It never crashes, it never slows down, it's easy to use, it has hidden depth if you need it, it's got a massive software library because it's been around for decades. Then we have the configurability. The MacBook Pro you can configure to the nth degree. There are so many configuration options. You can go up to 128 gigabytes of unified memory, 8 terabytes of storage. You've got the M3, the M3 Pro, the M3 Max. That's what I've got in this one. You can really fine tune this thing. You can't do that on an iPad Pro. You get the M4 chip, fantastic, but you can have 8 or 16 gig of RAM if you go for the 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte version for the latter. That's it. Storage goes up to 2 terabytes, and if that's not enough for you, if you want 4, or if you fancy remortgaging your house and having 8, then again, you have to get this. And while we're talking of configuration options, there is a bigger version of the MacBook Pro. This is the 14-inch, which is still an inch bigger than the M4 iPad Pro. But if that isn't big enough, you can go up to 16-inch, which is huge, but it might satisfy that need for more screen estate. MagSafe, you don't get this on the iPad Pro. I think we should have a version of it at some stage personally, because it disappeared from the MacBook Pro and then it came back because everyone wanted it back. If you don't know how it works, it's basically the charger, and it it attaches magnetically to your MacBook Pro. So if your kid walks past the table while you're tapping away on your $4,500 MacBook Pro, they don't trip over, well, they probably will still trip over this, but MagSafe means that nothing horrible happens. And what about external display support? So the iPad Pro can support one external display and it works fairly well, but you have to use Stage Manager. And Stage Manager for me, well, it does work in fairness, but for me it's just not the same as plugging this into one or two external monitors. And if you go for this M3 Max version, you can drive up to 4 external displays, which will make you feel like you're working at NASA. Now this next thing I wasn't sure whether to include or not, but I'm going to. It's Vision Pro. So basically if you have a Vision Pro headset, which I do, I'll link above to one of my videos, you can connect it to the MacBook Pro and then take the display off your MacBook Pro and put it into Vision OS. So it becomes this kind of massive display that you can resize, you can push away from you, you can pull towards you, you can put over there. It's one of the main reasons I'm still using Vision Pro. Now I do appreciate this is a tiny portion of this audience, but if you do have Vision Pro and you want to make the most use of it, you need a MacBook. The other thing I have to mention about the MacBook Pro is that we have an SD card slot. You can plug an SD card into here and read straight off it, which is, for me, fantastic. We also have an HDMI port and, well, 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports, and on the iPad Pro you get 1 port. The last thing I'm going to say before we get to the iPad Pro is the fact that if you're a power user, I know this is the best choice. You can make the most of this. You can get every ounce of power out of your MacBook Pro. You can configure it exactly as you need it, and you can install stuff on it that you need and that you can make full use of, and you can absolutely hammer those CPU and GPU cores if you want. Okay, let's give the iPad Pro some love. This is the M4 13-inch version, and it's a wonderful device. It's the thinnest device Apple has ever made, and it's genuinely surprising. When you get this out the box, you do kind of look at it and think, how have they done this? How on earth does this have a more capable chip than that? It's even thinner than the Apple Pencil Pro. This is the craziest thing. This is even crazier than the iPod Nano comparison, because when you put the Apple Pencil Pro on your iPad Pro, it kind of overhangs because this tablet is so skinny. So if that's your thing, if you love very thin tech, then we have iPadOS, and as much as macOS is a differentiator for that laptop, iPadOS is a differentiator for the iPad Pro, because for some people it's brilliant. And for those people it makes more sense than macOS. And yes, I know that if we compare the available software on the Mac to the iPad does lose out because it's restricted to the App Store, whereas the Mac has decades of third-party development support going into it and a massive software library. But regardless of that, this still has a very big App Store. However, the iPad Pro has something that the Mac I don't think is ever going to get, which is touch. You can touch this, you can swipe, you can pinch, you can do all that stuff because it has a touch screen. And whenever I've been using my iPad Pro for an extended period of time, when I go back to my MacBook, inevitably I reach out and try and press stuff. If you need a touch interface. Next up, we have the fact that the iPad Pro, the M4 version, has an OLED panel, a tandem OLED panel. It's apparently, according to Apple, it's the world's most advanced display or something like that. Now, you don't get that on the MacBook Pro. The MacBook Pro has a mini LED panel. It's still very good. It's still 120 Hz ProMotion, as is this. If you're the sort of person who wants to know that they've got an OLED screen on their device, then you have no choice but to get the M4 iPad Pro. Is it much different to the mini LED on the MacBook Pro? Not really. You do have to A/B test the two to notice the difference, but the blacks are definitely richer on this display. And the same thing goes for that M4 chip. If you want the absolute best chip, the most relevant, the newest chip that Apple produces, you have to get the iPad Pro at the time of filming, because at the time of filming, which is May 2024, we don't have an M4 MacBook Pro. The M4 iPad Pro does have a rear camera system, which you don't get on the MacBook Pro. Now, I don't use this, and I don't think many people do, to be honest, but if you like the idea of having a device where you can shoot very good looking 4K video and fantastic looking photos, and then edit them directly on the same device, you have to get this. The M4 iPad Pro also has Face ID, which you do not get on the MacBook Pro. If you want Face ID, if that is your thing. And then lastly, we have the price. The cheapest M3 MacBook Pro is £1,699. That's a decent price for a very, very capable Mac. But the cheapest 13-inch M4 iPad Pro is £1,299. So it's a lot cheaper. And if you go for the 11-inch version, that's £999. And if you really spec up a MacBook Pro, the amounts are eye-watering. There's just one more thing to discuss. Reality versus promise. And what I mean by that is that, as mentioned earlier, if you spend a lot of money on a MacBook Pro, and you can get the most value out of it. You can really, if you know how to, you can push those cores, you can maximize the storage, you can connect loads of external things to it and do stuff with those external things. You can basically extract as much value for money out of it as possible. The same can't be said for the iPad Pro. If you add the Magic Keyboard, an Apple Pencil Pro, if you go to 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes of storage, this sails past 2,000 quid. And at the moment, I don't think you can get enough out of this to justify that cost. We need this thing to be unleashed, and I do have faith in Apple for this. June next month, we have WWDC. That is it comes with the promise of iPad OS 18 and new AI capabilities. Crucially, new tools for developers. So if you're a developer and you want to extract all of the power from this M4 chip, I think we're getting close. I genuinely hope I've steered you in the right direction here. What I'd love to know in the comments is which one are you going for and why? However, if all of this sounds a little bit too expensive, I completely understand. And the good news is, if you hang around just for a few seconds, you'll get a link to my full review of the 13-inch M2 iPad Air.